Welcome to Hope in the Halls, Christian voices from Washington, D.C., sponsored by Hope to the Hill, also sponsored by Can We Pray, with your hosts Nathan and Amber Kistler. Learn more about Hope to the Hill at www.hopetothehill.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Hope in the Halls. We hope you've had a great week so far. We certainly have, and we are here in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee this week. We're coming to you from Pigeon Forge. We're always somewhere new.
Are we technically in Sevierville?
Well, technically, we're in Sevierville, but we've been in Pigeon Forge all week.
And then we've been in Gatlinburg.
Yes, to see our friends, the Gaither Vocal Band.
That was really a great time.
It was.
So we were able to, through multiple stops, because Amber has to stop every 45 minutes to an hour to walk around. We were able
That's
to...
because of my blood clots, not because I'm a diva.
No, this was the... Yeah.
You made it sound a little bit like Amber has to stop, but it's not because I want to.
Well, this was the first kind of short trip that you had since, you know, the whole thing. And we went over to see the vocal band, and Bill spent some time with him. That was such a blessing. We really had a great time doing that. And
it's kind of weird to watch them because, you know, every time I'm with them, I'm usually, you know, we're singing with them.
Yeah.
And so it was, at first I was like, man, this is going to be so strange just sitting there and taking it all in. But honestly, it was nice to just be fed and to be blessed by them. And Bill and Glory have always been good at that.
Yes. We got to see our good friend Dennis Swanberg.
Yeah. And then we got to see Pastor Benny Tate.
Yep. Pastor Tate.
He's going to come to D.C. with us.
Yeah,
so
really
excited
like
about that.
Pastor Benny. But, and then finished up there. And we had some stuff going on for the National Quartet Convention, which led to last night.
Yeah.
So this is a Sunday morning, so we're packing up here shortly to head back home. But normally we would be in our home church, but it was a long weekend, a long week.
No, we got done at almost 11 o'clock last night, so there was no driving back. But we did come back to our cabin here in Sevierville, which has been a wonderful place to stay all week. Our friend Rodney has been so gracious to allow us to stay here, and it has been such a blessing to be able to do so. But we got to introduce Dennis Quaid to our world last night, and I cannot tell you how much fun that was. I always tell people this when they ask me, what is Dennis Quaid like? And I always say, he's exactly what you would want him to be. He is very kind. He takes time with every single person that he meets. And he had a meet and greet yesterday at 1 o'clock. So we set up this whole meet and greet.
Yeah.
And I just need to shout out to our friends Mark and Sherry Sullivan because they really did a lot of the heavy lifting on this because they did his merch table. Yeah. They helped facilitate the line, and Mia and Brandon as well. And it could not have happened without them. And even Will and Jenny Underwood were there. They helped keep the people in a line because when Dennis Quaid comes to town, people line up to see him. They just do. He's a movie star.
Yeah.
And they love him.
And Melody and your whole family.
Yes.
And all the volunteers from NQC. Clark, thank you, Clark, so much for, Clark Beasley from NQC for being so gracious and helping, you know, share your volunteers with
yes, the NQC staff was amazing yesterday at facilitating
they did a great job.
The line and just keeping everything in good condition there and moving fast. Dennis showed up at 1 o'clock and the line was starting to wrap around the building already.
Yeah, it was busy.
And you know, if that were me walking in, I'd be like, oh my goodness, I've got all these people. How long is this going to take? And Dennis, he stands there with every single person, ask them about themselves, ask them where they're from, and they love to just talk to him. Of course, they all come up and say, I loved you and such. You know, they've all got their favorite movies, and then they love his singing and his new album, Fallen.
Yeah.
And I love especially to watch him with kids because he is so good with kids.
Oh, yeah.
He is so good
and
with the kids.
Older ladies.
Oh, yeah.
He would always...
He's good with all the ladies.
My favorite thing he would say to some of the older ladies, he goes, you have a great face. And they would go, oh, thank you.
My favorite comment yesterday was a lady walked up to him and she said, I love you in Yellowstone. And he said, yeah, Kevin Costner's great. And some people, they mean well. They just don't know necessarily where they've seen him all the time.
Two other movies that people said young people asked if he
Yeah,
was
they
in.
said Edge of Tomorrow. It was Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. Edge of Tomorrow. Man, loved you in that movie. And he's like, well, I think you were thinking of something else. But
I'm sure that happens a lot to him. But he didn't come out just once. He wasn't even, so here was the thing. It was a funny story. He wasn't supposed to come out after he was done singing last night. After his set, he was just going to go home. And we, during the time that he had off, during yesterday, he was there at the convention center for about 4 hours. And he sat in his green room, and I think he was supposed to go eat. And I think Laura, his wife, was actually shopping. So she just said, "You're good where you're at." And so he stayed at the convention center, and he said, I don't know if I'll be able to come out afterwards because he had to drive back home last night.
Yeah.
And he said, but I would love to go ahead and sign CDs and hats and T-shirts so that whatever they buy, it's already autographed.
Yeah.
And we were like, that's a great idea. And so we brought him 2 boxes of CDs, brought him some shirts and hats, and he would get done signing them. He goes, is there any more CDs? And we were like, yeah, if you want to sign more. He goes, yeah. And you'd go get more boxes.
Yep.
And then he'd sign those. He goes, well, is there any more? Yeah, there's more, Dennis. And then you'd bring more boxes in. And so he probably signed almost 200 CDs that are autographed. And he had planned to do that so that he could go home and that they could still get the autograph, even though they may not have got to meet him. And then by accident, Jason on stage last night said, Dennis will be back at his table to meet and greet you. And it was total accident. And Dennis was leaving. He was getting in his car, and you ran, because when we got back to the table,
there was like 40 or 50
there was
people
already a huge line starting. And we were like, what are we going to tell these people? So you ran back, and we said, we're going to leave it up to Dennis, because obviously if he needs to go, we all understand, and we'll make sure the people know. And he was gracious enough to come back out to his table once again. He had already changed clothes. He changed back into his stage clothes, came back into that convention center, got in the line to start meeting and greeting these people and taking pictures. And he stood there for another 30, 45 minutes. Even though we said, okay, it'll only be 10 minutes. I think he actually said, just give me 10 minutes. That's all I can do. He stayed for 45.
Yeah, I think actually my favorite, it wasn't from yesterday, but a couple of weeks ago when we were at his house, we were talking about him coming to NQC. And we, movie star people, you never really know what they're going to need or say. And so we asked him and said, well, Dennis, do you need someone to drive you to NQC? And he goes, well, I'm not that kind of celebrity.
Yeah. He said, I drive myself.
He said, I actually like to drive myself. So we laughed, and he's just a normal guy. And
he is just the greatest. And his testimony is amazing. He talked about he was a drug addict, and a pretty heavy drug addict. And
yeah, he calls it, he went to cocaine school.
Yeah, because he said that's what he called rehab. Yeah. And so he, his testimony is incredible about his mama, who prayed for him every single day and told him that Jesus loved him and wanted him to come back home. And so did she. And I tell you what, mama's prayers are powerful. Mother's prayer is so powerful.
Yeah, and I think Dennis is a reminder that the scripture, train up a child in the way that they should go. When they're old, they won't depart from it. Dennis is 69 years old, and he grew up in the Baptist church. His mom was a praying mom. And to see at his age now, him come back in the last 3 or 4 years to the Lord is incredible.
Yeah, it is.
What God has done. And
to see those people love him last night.
Yeah.
I mean, the people already knew him from the movies, but we were really introducing him into our world as now he, recorded this gospel album, and all these people went home with it. Thousands and thousands of people went home with it last night. And I just can't tell you how amazing it was to just sit back and watch that unfold, because I was so proud to know him. I was so proud to, to be a part of bringing him into this genre of music that he had not been a part of before. He certainly didn't know what NQC was, and walking into it had no clue, but he had the best time.
He really did.
He really had the best time, and he was so welcomed and loved on. And that's so important for someone who probably feels like an outsider a little bit. He's been in Hollywood his whole life, obviously with a rough past, and just a lot. There's a lot there, a lot of baggage.
Just to play you so you can hear what it sounded like when Jason was introducing him last night. Here, I'll play it for you. Maybe. Oh, I have the sound turned down.
You guys did a huge warm welcome to our friend Mr. Dennis Quaid.
And you couldn't hear that, Amber, but you were on stage.
I was on stage.
They went nuts. For
I
him
heard
last night.
enough from stage that they were screaming for
that's
him.
what they just heard here. Sorry, I'm the only one with the headphones in on this right now.
Yeah,
as the
I'm kinda-
engineer as well. So sorry, but y'all heard it, and so grateful when Christian folks are like Barnabas. You remember when Saul gets saved, and God brings Barnabas into his life, the encourager, because nobody wanted anything to do with him. And Christians need to be that type of people whenever someone comes to Christ, to love on them, to encourage them in their walk. And I think that's very, very important. So we had a great time.
We
It was really
did.
good.
We did. Now, typically, this podcast is about DC, and I wanted to talk about something that we watched while we were here in Pigeon Forge this week. We were not in DC, but we certainly try to stay in tune with all things DC happenings.
Yes.
And this week we had the Republican debate yet again,
In
at the
Simi
Reagan
Valley.
Library.
Yes,
Yeah.
Simi Valley, which is I don't think you've ever been there. It's an incredible place. I think my dad always said when I was growing up, it was the most beautiful presidential library that America has to offer, and it really is. You can walk on an Air Force One plane. You can see Marine One there, and just a really cool place. If you've never been to the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, you should definitely go. It's an amazing place.
And speaking of Reagan, Dennis has a new movie coming out
Yep, he played
where he
Reagan.
plays president. It's literally called Reagan, and it's coming out next year. So just going to throw in that little marketing
yeah,
bit.
well, and that's actually how all of this kind of came to be this week.
It is.
Was through our friend Jason Noble, that's working on the Reagan film. We've been working with Speaker McCarthy's office for some time to prepare for this movie, to do a screening, which
Not just a screening.
the premiere,
The
hope God willing,
premiere
of the
of
movie
Reagan.
at the U.S. Capitol. And so all of this, the relationship with Dennis and all of that kind of came through that doorway. And we're really excited. The film is amazing. We can't tell you anything about it. We signed an NDA when we watched it.
I mean, if you know anything about history, you know what happens. But
Yes, but it's an incredible
it's kind of like The Chosen. And if you read the Bible, you're going to have spoilers.
But an interesting take on Reagan's presidency and all of that. So I'm very, very grateful, and just a privilege that we get to be part of this. But anyway, so yes, Simi Valley, the
Republican debate.
yes, the Republican debate was very
It was
interesting.
an interesting one, wasn't it?
It really was. I find it difficult at this point, and everybody I think that has watched understands and knows most likely who the nominee is going to be at this point on the Republican ticket. It seems to me at this point, unless something drastic changes, that most of the other folks are vying for who's going to be a VP candidate.
Yeah.
Just because of the way everything has gone with the most recent indictment of President Trump. I really think that solidified the fact that he will most likely be the nominee.
And this is just my opinion. I
Sure.
think that if for some reason it's not him, I think the next one in line, again, this is my opinion of just watching the debates, watching the polls, is DeSantis. I think he has the next best shot
Yeah.
at it. And he really held himself well at that Republican debate.
I thought he did
When they
good.
wanted them, like I noticed when they wanted them to write the names down, I think was it Nikki Haley that said, write the names. I don't remember if it was her or if it was one of the people asking. Yeah.
candidates, yeah.
But he was the first one that said, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. And he just has leadership qualities. Look at what he's done in Florida. He's been a great governor. And that's why Florida doesn't want to lose him.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose him, and rightfully so. But I think DeSantis is shown to be a great leader. He does obviously have the look, whatever you want to call a presidential look. He has it. His wife is gorgeous. And he's just, they seem to be good people, and they line up with a lot of the values that Christians would support.
I agree. And I think it's going to be, an interesting year for sure. And obviously, the next 4 months or so will definitely show what's going to, who will be the front runner. And obviously, we have a very clear front runner right now. But I will be interested to see what happens over the coming months.
Did you see the poll that said Trump won the debate and he wasn't even there?
Well, and I think he made a very calculated decision before the first debate, and obviously the second debate, and he made a point that I thought was actually a very good point. Everyone, even though he wasn't there, the questions at the first debate, the majority of them were about him. If he had been there, it would have been a bashing session, where they would have had free reign at him. And so, in his mind, why at this point would I even go there if I'm the front runner and they're just going to try to bash me the whole time? And it made a lot of sense to me as to why he did it. I think that people should be able to hear between candidates, though I think in Trump's case, everyone really knows what his platform is and has been. And so it is an interesting moment here, something that we've not really encountered in American politics before at all. And I think Trump has been an anomaly from the very beginning, something American politics nor any political faction around the world has ever endured. Trump has been different. And so you can't really plan those things out. He is a wild card, always.
Always.
And so the next few months are definitely going to be interesting.
Now, does he have to go to a debate? And I figure there's a lot of people that have this question. Does he actually have to show up to at least one debate to be the Republican nominee?
No, I don't think so, because, the Democrats are not planning on having any debates either. Obviously, they have an incumbent president too,
yeah.
But someone can challenge, and
obviously, whoever becomes the nominee will have to there'll be a debate between
yes,
Democrat and
but
Republican.
I don't think
I'm
that
talking
there is
about
a
just
rule
Republican.
for the Republican side or Democrat side that you have to partake in the primary debate.
So he doesn't really have to show up at all to any of them.
No, he doesn't have to. I don't think, as far as that, unless there's something that I'm not sure or not aware of. But I do think, we've talked about
Look at the
this
news
before.
right now, what it says. Literally watching the news, it says Trump continues to dominate the GOP field. This is
we
in
have
the
TV on
background.
in front of us here with he's
46%, and then like we talked about, DeSantis is at 15%.
Yep.
Nikki Haley's at 11%.
she's definitely gone up.
Yeah.
And Scott has gone up. He was at 3% just a couple weeks ago. Ron Swamy was a little bit higher. I think he's come across in a bad way, especially this second debate, very combative. I like Vivek as a person. I think he's a really brilliant guy. I think he's had a lot of common sense conversation, but I don't think he came across as really strong this last debate.
He reminds me, his it's and the way he talks reminds me of a Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? That's actually a really good point.
They have that same way of having a conversation where it's so intelligent you can hardly keep up because they talk so fast.
Yeah.
But everything they're saying is dead on it, and it's intelligent. They are very, very smart. But sometimes that doesn't come across as a leader as well. Sometimes that comes across as an educator, right? And someone who can debate very well.
Yeah.
But when you are trying to lead a country, you have people all over the country that want, and you have to try to identify with.
Yeah.
To me, that rules out a lot of people who are just looking at you going, I don't have a clue what you just said. And I think, and to play off that point, I think that's why Trump was so popular, right?
Yeah.
Because he spoke the people's language.
Yeah.
He said things that they wanted to say and never could say.
Right.
And he said things that no other GOP candidate would ever say.
Yeah.
And most of them thought it too.
Yeah.
But they're too scared to say it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what made him so popular
Yeah,
when
I
you really
agree with
look at the
that.
grand scheme of things.
Well, and I think, at this point, we are in a foreign policy nightmare as a country where there are so many foreign policy debacles that America is facing right now. And whoever that is, and obviously I would say Trump overall, his foreign policy was really good. The way he dealt with people, and obviously people had their opinions, but the way that he dealt with people, which was very Reagan-esque in this sense, when Reagan said something, that, that he was going to do something, he meant it. It's like, when he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, they knew he meant what he said, and he said what he meant. And so there's a component to Trump that people knew, and maybe it was like the wild card factor that maybe in the beginning they didn't know what he would do. They were like, I don't know,
Right.
But then people came to realize that when Trump said he was going to do something, he was going to do it. And I think that kept us out of a lot of difficult positions foreign policy-wise that we are now in some really bad situations, between China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, so many other countries, Iran. So we're dealing with some issues that whoever the next president is, whether it's Republican or Democrat, but on the Republican ticket, at least at this point, we're talking about, we're going to have somebody that really has wisdom. And again, we take that back to, where does wisdom come from? Who do we go to for wisdom? Who should we be going to for wisdom?
Yeah.
And that's obviously God's word, and begging God for wisdom for our leaders. In these instances today, especially over the last week, as we've been dealing with potential government shutdowns and all of that, we have had members that have reached out. Even though we haven't been in D.C. because, you being in the hospital, still had members that have reached out. We've had members that have called. We've prayed with some members. And the question is, what are we supposed to do? Are we kicking the can down the road more and more? At what point do we stop that? Do we try to rein in spending as a country? All of those questions. And the Bible answers each and every one of those questions.
Yeah.
That's where we encourage members to go to God's word for the wisdom that they need. And not just wisdom, common sense things. Common sense
Okay,
answers.
speaking of common sense, they kept bringing up this one thing in the debate the other night that I just thought was, I guess I understood it, and I know that you'll understand it when I say it, but they have made this a thing about, and listen, we talked about Trump always says the things that everybody wanted to say and doesn't. That doesn't mean that he certainly should not filter sometimes. Sure. Because there are a lot of times probably, because there are some times when he speaks and we're just sitting there just cringing, just like, why are you saying that out loud? Just, just don't tweet, don't say a word, just go do. And he was working, but at the same time, just don't say anything. But the other night they mentioned that he had said that Vladimir Putin was a great leader, and they kept harping on that.
Yeah.
And they just were like, how in the world could he say that? I understood what he was saying when he said that. He doesn't mean that he's a great person. He doesn't mean that he was a wonderful guy.
Yeah,
what he means
leader.
is that he is a powerful leader. And maybe great leader wasn't the right, adjective to use. Maybe great was not the adjective that he should have used.
Yeah, I think he said he was brilliant or something at one point.
And it's not so much
Not
as
untrue.
it's hard. We understand what that means, right? Like, it's not so much that it's a compliment as much as he's trying to make people understand what you're up against. Because when you look at powerful people, powerful leaders in the past, even people like Hitler, they had a gift of leadership, I would say, that even though they were evil, absolutely evil people followed them by the thousands and thousands, and they listened to them, and that no matter what they said, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And so there was this gift that they had that was used for evil.
Yeah.
It could have been used for good, but it wasn't. It was used for horrible, evil acts. And I think that's basically what he was saying about Vladimir Putin, was that he does have great leadership skills because of people in Russia that just, they follow him and they think he's amazing. How many people have we met from Russia that love him? And even though we try from our point of view, like, do you know what he's done? How horrible these things, they're blind to it, right?
Well, and I think the important way to look at that is anybody, no matter what country you go to, and I think we've always had a unique, and anybody who works in government should have a unique perspective on this, or anyone who has traveled a lot around outside of the U.S. Every country and every person within that country, they're going to be proud of their country. They want the best for their country. So typically, most of the time, they're very proud of their leaders, those who have led them to take care of their country and their mind.
And the same argument could be made for Trump.
Sure.
The same argument can be made for Trump. For the people that are always Trumpers, is what we call them, meaning that no matter what he does, whether it's bad or good, they tune it out. And that's leadership material. And it can be used for bad sometimes, but if it is used for good, it's powerful.
Right, but everybody wants to believe the best of their country.
Right.
So I think the point that I would try to make to people is when we look at other countries, like even a Russia, because we have a friend we met through George and Linda, Dr. Roller and his wife Roman, who's a precious guy. We love Roman. He's from Russia, and he's been there his whole life, but he's come to the States. He hasn't come since the whole Russia, Ukraine debacle, but
I don't think
Roman,
he's come since COVID.
Maybe not. But Roman is so passionate, about his country. And whenever he would see his American friends or Ukrainian friends bash, his country and his president, he had a problem with that. It just as I would if I was outside my country or I was on Facebook and people that I knew were bashing my country, when I believe that America is the greatest nation on earth.
It is.
And
even with all its problems, it is.
So I think Russians or Ukrainians or Chinese people, whoever, they can see all the bad, sometimes can see the bad of their country, but also still love their country. And so oftentimes we look at people because they're faceless in the sense of, a president of Russia, is that we see him, we know who he is, but he is a faceless person because we don't know him. There's no humanity there to understand that these are human beings too that are very different than we are, but they're not so different in the sense that they don't love their own country. And so I can respect that while having major disagreements on the way he does things, and obviously the things he has done, through the KGB, all those things.
Well, that just comes back to common sense,
that's
right? I feel like a lot of people have lost common sense nowadays. And when I would watch that, I would go, I completely understand what that means.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that because I understand it. And I understand that they're trying to use that against him for political reasons as well. They're trying to make an argument against that he's for Russia and that, that his relationships with foreign affairs made it bad, because he was so close to these people. But really, he was doing that to protect our country in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at where we are right now, as opposed to 4 years ago, there's no comparison. I mean, whether or not people liked the way Trump handled foreign policy, I would have to say, because I'll give credit where it's due, people will look back on that and say, okay, and he handled that well, I think. And there are things, again, every president that I've worked around, in Washington all these years and been around, because I was around during the Bush years, the Obama years, the Trump years, and now the Biden years. There are things that I appreciate, that were done. There are things that I don't appreciate that were done. The same goes for Congress itself. I mean, you look at Nancy Pelosi, which most people that are conservative, 99.9% of conservatives would have great disdain for Nancy Pelosi. We've looked at her as, as a human being. She's a doting grandmother that I've seen how she interacts with her grandkids.
Boy, when you put that into perspective.
Yeah, I mean,
she's a grandmother.
Yeah, she loves her grandchildren. She's and honestly, to be completely frank too, during COVID, when people, there was a lot of things going on, January 6th, all those different things. They had the fences around the Capitol. Pelosi actually was allowing, under her speakership, certain things. She allowed her dining room in the Capitol to be used for some Bible studies and things like that. She was very kind in a lot of ways when it came to those things. But we have to really be careful in how we interact and react, because when we look at people as faceless individuals, and we talked about this before, it's very easy to have disdain and hatred and all the things that come along with that. And so all of this is tied in together in how we're looking at, this country, our country. And Chaplain Black has always said it really well, I think. Everybody, both sides of the aisle, there are slivers of truth in both sides. Should we care for the the hungry and the people that want to come to America. When you look at the Statue of Liberty and we see the words, bring me your tired, your hungry, the longing masses, those who long to be free. That's what America is about. And now we've gotten into this hyper-politicalization of the issues. Every issue is over-politicized, where, we're shutting down borders, which borders are important. Every country has borders. It's important. But some people are so afraid that they're going to be part of, they're going to be lumped in with the other side, that they don't want to go, okay, hey, we do have an immigration problem we have to figure out.
Exactly.
There's people all over this world that are hungry and have family issues, like this German family that we've been trying to help with Diana Harshberger and other members right now. They've been in America for 15 years.
You've probably seen them on Fox News recently.
Yes,
they're about to be.
They were on Huckabee last night.
They were on Huckabee. We've become friends with them, and actually through Rodney.
Yeah, Rodney was one that made us aware.
And we wanted to try to help where we could, and you contacted Congresswoman Diana Harshberger, and we contacted Lisa McClain, and
others,
many others, and they are facing deportation coming up. What is it, October 15th?
October 11th.
October
10
11th.
days.
I mean, and you're talking about a family is going to be split up.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy is they've been here 15 years. They left Germany. And
they were
maybe
seeking asylum.
They came here as asylum seekers because Germany in 2008 had actually made it illegal to homeschool your children. Mm-hmm. And there were families in Germany that all they wanted to do is homeschool and teach their children the way that they felt they should be taught. And
in their case, it was the Bible.
Yes.
They wanted to teach
and
biblical
they
principles.
didn't like what public schools in Germany were teaching overall. And so they came here as asylum seekers. So now they're facing deportation and they would go to jail if the parents would going back to Germany. The children are now grown up. They have the parents have grandchildren now. The children have kids, and the sons and the daughters would have to leave their spouses and children in America to go back to Germany. I mean, it is a potential catastrophic ordeal for this family. And so we have families not only like that, because that's an important topic, it's an important issue, but we have people that have come from Mexico and all over this planet looking for the American dream. And so, as Chaplain Black has said, there is some truth on both sides. The Republicans say now, hey, we need to have border security. That is true. Democrats say we need to help people who need, desire to come here. That is also true.
Right. How
we get to the middle of that is the problem, right?
Exactly.
So Chaplain Black calls it, and I think it's a very wise thing that he's said it for years. We are faced often in this body, as he says, in the Senate, with right versus right conundrums. So there are components of those things. How do we find ways to come together as a nation, as people in government, to have these conversations, to better the American people and others around the world who long for the American dream? That is the difficult discussion where we need wisdom and less hyper-politicalization of the issues today. People need to drop their metaphorical guns here in the House and the Senate and begin to have conversations. And again, that takes us back to the very first episode we talked about. How do we do that? I believe it's through having a meal together again, through getting to know people across the aisle, learning to love. You remember Congressman Jeff Jackson. I've told him this personally, and you and I have been, actually, I love his videos on Instagram. He's a Democrat from North Carolina. Every week, sometimes multiple times a week, he posts a video explaining the democratic process, what's going on this week, why things are done, why he's doing certain things. He'll call out his own party. He'll call out the other party. And obviously, I would have some major disagreements with Jeff Jackson, but I can agree with him on this. He has said from the beginning, he just started in January, from the very beginning, I am willing to take people on a person-by-person basis and get to know them, to love on them, and to find where we can work together. That is the type of, that's what we need to be as Americans. As Christians, you and I have this conversation. We're called to a higher standard. I had more people at NQC the past few days come up that listen to this podcast or pay attention to what we're doing in DC. And the number one question is, well, what do you think, about this election cycle? Or what do you think about, these people in Congress? It must be so hard to do this. And I go, listen, we're called as Christians to a higher standard, the ultimate standard, which is to love people as Jesus loves them. And we have to start there, right?
Right.
And you and I have tried our very best to do that well. And maybe we don't always do it well, but you do such a great job of loving on people in that way. And what an opportunity we have.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of like higher standards, let's talk about how they dropped the dress code for the Senate this last week. That to me is mind-boggling. Now that is something I can emphatically say I disagree with.
Well, and there's talk that it may be changed. I mean, there's a lot of kickback from this whole.
I hope there is
pushback, actually,
because that we should be held. They are leaders of our country. They should be held to a higher standard in that sense. I mean, you want to look your best when you are representing our country, and then like when you're talking about going to church, right? That argument has always been, well, some people's best might be jeans and a t-shirt. These people, I promise you, they have enough money to go get suits. It's not jeans and a t-shirt being their best.
Well, yeah, even at McDonald's, you have to wear a uniform.
Exactly.
Some people would say, I wouldn't say it's the worst job in America.
I think, but my whole, I guess, just pet peeve with this thing is that they changed it for one individual.
I agree.
And at what point do we stop doing that?
Yeah.
Where we just stop catering to the 1%.
Well, and that is
When you're as a country, you're saying we don't want this.
Well, it brings
we
up
don't
a
want
very
this.
interesting conversation because, as people who would be much more conservative, than liberal on our side,
Right.
we often are faced and experience this whole thing where America is run and where America is at a place where the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The loudest people have been the 1, 2, 3 percentile of Americans that get the most attention. Christians, we again, and it all coincides. Christians, as we're called to be salt and light, as we're called to, a higher standard, we're also called to speak the truth. And we had this conversation just last night with a singer from a group waiting backstage. As truth bearers and truth speakers, it's okay to say what God's word says. It's okay to speak out. Don't be mean or divisive. But look at Daniel. Daniel never screams at people. When he goes to these kings, but when God writes on the wall, and the king calls Daniel in, Belshazzar calls Daniel in to tell him what it means. Daniel doesn't scream at him. He actually calmly just says, "Your days are numbered."
Can you imagine?
No.
This is quiet guy coming in going, so that just means your days are numbered. Hope you have a good day.
Yeah, pretty much. But he's unafraid to speak the truth. So as Christians, we should be, I don't want to say loud, we should be vocal.
We should be more involved.
Yes, we should be involved, vocal, sharing the truth. And we don't do that anymore. We're too comfortable in American culture, Christian American culture, with our lives and living in peace and all of that. And peace is good. It's okay. It's great. But
it's comfortable.
It is comfortable. We are comfortable now. We have dropped the ball. And then as we've allowed culture to run away from us, as we've created our little Christian, castles or whatever, communities, we're now throwing rocks at it, going, oh my, how could you, how dare you, how, I can't believe it. Well, most people just sit and complain at their local restaurant with their buddies. They don't actually do anything about it when they can. We are the only country in the world where people have the ability to talk to the people that represent them. How cool is that? We are such a rarity and an anomaly in the world, though we don't take advantage of it. There are more people, I would dare say, and you and I have seen this, that come from other countries to communicate with our leaders than average Americans do. Average Americans may come and they want to see the Capitol and that's great. But they don't come to actually be part of the democratic process. And I can assure you, there's a senator just this week that has been indicted for taking bribes from Egypt.
And
he was on Foreign Affairs. Yes, both of them. So I can tell you for a fact, that every country around the world is sending people to communicate with our leaders, Americans need to do the same.
We were at a church not too long ago, and there was a woman there from Africa, and she got up and she prayed in the African tongue that she spoke, and none of us understood. And afterwards, the pastor said she prayed that America would prevail and be blessed, because she says that if America is blessed, it will bless Africa and all the other nations around it.
Yeah.
And so I thought that's such a powerful point to make, that, and the pastor made it that morning. It gives me chills thinking about it, that other countries, not America, other countries are praying for America to be blessed, because they know if America is blessed, they in turn will be blessed.
Yeah, and I think sometimes this is I don't want to get into a whole nother conversation because we got to wrap up in a second, but
well, you just got to come for the next episode.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes being blessed, or I used to hear people say, that they would the scripture, those who bless Israel, will be blessed.
Right.
And so often, people, this is gonna be a doozy here, okay? Sometimes people have assumed, actually, the majority of people have assumed that scripture means that whatever Israel wants to do,
let them do it,
and we send it
and
with
leave them
our
alone.
blessing, because God will only bless us if we help, always say yes.
Right.
Become yes men. Being yes men is actually not a biblical premise for anybody. I'm just using Israel as an example here, okay? Often I have a dear friend, and Jamie well, probably the greatest mentor in my life. We've traveled to the Holy Land. I think I've been 11 times with Jamie over the years. And Jamie made this point, and I thought it was such a brilliant and beautiful point. He said, sometimes the greatest form of love that we can show is saying no.
Right.
So that means that sometimes, blessing somebody or loving someone, just like when you have a family member that is, away from God, and they want you, our culture says, hey, if you love me, you're going to support me and tell me that everything's great and everything's going to be just fine and all this. That is not real love.
Right.
That's not blessing and speaking into that person's life. Sometimes it's saying, I can't do that. Yeah. This is not good. The truth, speaking the truth to people is important. So in government, that's what we try to do on a daily basis, is through loving these folks, through trying to bless them and others. Sometimes we say yes. A lot of times we say yes. Sometimes we say no. And sometimes it's just speaking whatever God has called us to say to these people. And so as Christians, what can we take away from we've talked about a lot of things today. What can we take away from this? Well, a few things would be learning to love well, speaking the truth, and being okay with that, but also really taking into account where we are in America today and the importance of being involved in the processes that we have. We're so blessed to live in this country. We're sitting in a cabin right now in Sevierville, Tennessee, that is absolutely stunning. And we're grateful to Rodney and Heather for blessing us to be able to stay here. Most people in the world don't even know what that's like.
No.
And so what a privilege it is.
It is. And what a privilege it is to do this podcast with you. We get to do it together.
We do, and I love it. And we got pushed back because of Amber's hospital stuff going on, so we're still going to have get on with Eduardo. We were supposed to meet Tim in DC to record a podcast, and Eduardo.
Yeah.
So we had to push that back a little bit. So we're going to finish all of those, and I'm sorry we've been behind the past couple of weeks. We usually do 2 a week. It's been more like 1 every other week the past 2.5 weeks, but we're getting back into the swing of things. But if you haven't followed the podcast, you can do it.
Yep, on Apple Music, on Spotify, on Amazon, and anywhere that you have a listening, platform.
That's right. If you want to find out more info about what we do in DC, you can go to hopetothehill.com. We have a trip in January called Passages DC, History and Hymns, but Passages is who puts that on. January 22 to 25. We'd love to have you sign up for that, passagesdc.com. And are we missing anything?
We also
else?
have a newsletter that comes out every single month, and
Yep,
you can
on the
subscribe to
first.
that on hopetothehill.com as well.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep up with more than just the podcast, that's a good way to kind of
Yes.
keep up with not just us, but our entire team as well.
You can go to hopetothehill.com and you can subscribe to that newsletter by inputting your email address there. And again, as always, we would be honored if you would consider partnering with us financially. Everything that we do, the work that we do in DC, our teams, is through the generous donations of people like you, people in the pew, churches, and business folks. And so we're very grateful. You know who you are. Those of you who support our ministry and support me and Amber, we're very grateful to all of you.
Yes, we are.
Thank you, guys.
And until next time, we will see you guys here on Hope in the Halls.